I am Irene, a 30-year-old enjoying my single life. I work in sales at a foreign-owned company. For me, family trips are an annual tradition that provides a special time to rejuvenate my mind and body while reaffirming my bond with my family. My family has decided to visit Hawaii every year, where we relax on the beautiful beaches and savor the fresh local cuisine. This trip has been one of my cherished memories since childhood. Of course, this year too, that season was approaching, and I was looking forward to going to Hawaii with my entire family. However, after the Christmas Eve family party ended and I was cleaning up, my mother abruptly said something that cruelly shattered my expectations. "Irene, I don't think you'll be able to join us for the Hawaii trip this year." I was at a loss for words at the sudden statement. "What do you mean?" When I asked, my mother averted her gaze and began to explain. "This year the budget is tight. It's also partly because you reduced your financial support to Christoph's family a bit." I listened to my mother's words in disbelief. Several years ago, I was informed that my brother Christoph's family was in a difficult financial situation, and thinking of my nephew and niece, I began providing monthly support. Even though I don't have an exceptional income, I've managed to contribute a significant amount to support my family. Even so, being told I couldn't join the trip didn't make sense to me. But I've been sending a considerable amount every month. I thought there was enough to plan a Hawaii trip with that money. My mother showed a troubled expression but said nothing in return. Instead, my father spoke up. "Well, while we were adjusting the plans, certain circumstances arose, and we had no choice but to prioritize Christoph's family." "What circumstances?" I let out a deep sigh. The atmosphere was heavy, and I didn't feel like pressing further. However, anger and questions swirled within me. To begin with, the reason for my brother Christoph's family's financial difficulties was never entirely clear, and my doubts about it were never resolved. Because of that, I had always carried a sense of unease in my heart. That night I stayed alone in my room, deeply lost in thought. Up until now, I had continued to provide financial support for Christoph's family, believing it was for their sake. But why was the money always so insufficient? I had been supporting them while sacrificing my own pleasures and saving by living a frugal life. The money should have been managed by his wife, Colleen, and I didn't think they were spending it on unnecessary things. At that moment, a certain thought crossed my mind. There was one thing that had been bothering me, so I decided to confirm it directly with Christoph. Since I had believed Christoph's words without question and continued my financial support, he had a responsibility to explain the reasons properly. I decided to use my next vacation as an opportunity to meet Christoph and get some answers. The meeting place was a local cafe, a quiet spot where there were no children or family members around. Sitting across the table from me, Christoph looked slightly nervous. "It's been a while, Irene," Christoph said with a smile. "Yes, it has. I have something I want to ask you today." Without returning his smile, I got straight to the point. "Can you tell me how you've been using the money I've sent so far?" Christoph's eyes widened for a moment and he froze as if at a loss for words. "Well, of course, it's for the family, for living expenses, education, and so on. Is that all?" I calmly asked, my sharp gaze piercing Christoph. He flinched and closed his mouth. Sensing his silence, I pressed further. "Christoph, is it true that you've been having an affair?" At those words, the color drained from Christoph's face. His eyes darted nervously for a moment and he bit his lip with a pained expression before muttering in a low voice, "Who told you?" I raised an eyebrow slightly at his question, but quickly responded quietly, "Does it matter who told me? So you are having an affair, aren't you?" I was a bit shocked by the revelation of his infidelity, but I knew I needed to get to the bottom of the money issue, so I continued. "The affair is a problem, but what I want to know is where the money went. I need you to explain in detail how the money I sent for the kids was used. Why is there a shortage of funds?" Christoph remained silent, but I could see the tension clearly running down his back. He seemed torn between confessing and finding a way to dodge the question, but it took a while before he finally spoke. Eventually, with a deep sigh, he began, as if bracing himself. "Yes, I did have an affair, I admit it. But it's over now. There's nothing between us anymore. I'm truly sorry." His voice wavered slightly, making his apology sound less convincing. I stared into his eyes and asked my next question. "And what about my money?" At that, Christoph fell silent again. Finally he spoke, his face contorted. I gave her some. Just a little. I haven't calculated the exact amount. Originally, I intended it to supplement our living expenses, but in the end, part of it... "So you used the money on your affair partner," I said, as if confirming the obvious. Christoph couldn't meet my eyes, staring down instead and muttering vaguely, "It's all over now, really. So, can't you forgive me?" I scoffed lightly, leaning back in my chair with my arms crossed. "Forgive you? The money I sent was for your kids, and you used it without permission on your affair partner? Whether or not I accept your apology is one thing, but forgiving the situation? Not a chance." For a moment, it felt as if the cafe was enveloped in an eerie silence. Then I cut to the heart of the matter. "You said you don't know the exact amount you spent on her. Was it around $10,000? More than that?" Christoph's face grew even paler, and in a strained voice he replied, "Maybe around that. It's possible." "It's possible? Don't you feel ashamed using such vague language?" I showed no mercy, though little by little, without even realizing, the money just drained away, like a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Christoph looked up, unable to hold it in anymore. "I know, but don't blame me like this. I regret it too." "Do you think you don't deserve the blame? Have you even thought about how Colleen feels? Or your family?" My voice was no longer just angry. It carried a detached, almost cold indifference. "You've lost something far greater than money. Trust. Do you even understand how high that cost is?" Christoph's face twisted bitterly as he sank into his chair, shoulders slumping. "Colleen already knows. Divorce has come up." His words softened my expression for a brief moment, but I quickly steeled myself again. "Then, this is where the conversation ends. I won't be sending you any more money. You'll have to figure things out on your own." "Wait, Irene, please!" Christoph reached out in a panic, his voice desperate as he pleaded. "If you suddenly cut me off like this, I don't know what will happen to my family. There's still a chance to fix things." I raised my hand to stop him. "There's no point in talking further. The money I sent, what it was used for, and the result, that's the situation we're in now. That's enough. From here on out, you need to take responsibility for yourself." Leaving those words heavy with meaning, I stood up. As I walked away, I made a firm decision in my heart. There was no way I could tolerate my hard-earned money being used for such irresponsible actions. About a week before my meeting with Christoph, his affair had been discovered by Colleen. One day, she happened to find an intimate message on Christoph's smartphone. Fueled by suspicion, Colleen confronted him, and one piece of evidence after another surfaced. With no way out, Christoph confessed to everything. The details and duration of the affair shattered Colleen's trust entirely, and her anger surpassed anything I could have imagined. No matter how many times Christoph apologized, Colleen's anger and despair ran deep, and the damage to their relationship couldn't be undone. Even so, Christoph desperately tried to repair the situation. He apologized repeatedly, begged for forgiveness, but not a shred of trust remained in Colleen's heart. As time passed, Colleen's resolve hardened, and she ultimately decided to divorce him. It was a few months ago when Colleen confided in me about Christoph's affair. With a somber expression, she began, "Lately, Christoph's been acting strangely cold and suspicious." As I listened, she revealed her concerns about his habit of hiding his phone and the sudden increase in his late returns home. Although surprised, I listened carefully, supporting her as she expressed her anxiety and anger. Since no concrete evidence had been found yet, I had hoped Colleen was simply overthinking things. However, with Christoph's affair proven to be true, I could not forgive him. The fact that my money had been given to his affair partner was also deeply upsetting. From that day on, I began to slowly regain my composure and made an effort to sort out my feelings. The love I felt for Colleen, my nephew, and my niece clashed with the disappointment I had in Christophe, leading to countless sleepless nights. Each time, I felt an overwhelming heaviness in my heart and could do nothing but turn my thoughts over and over in my mind. As I gradually confronted that pain, I decided to focus on my work. It seemed like the only way to shift my mindset. I wanted even just a little to ease the burden on my heart. From then on, I threw myself into my work, feeling a growing sense of clarity as I immersed myself in my duties. Forcing myself to stay motivated through my tasks, I eventually began to think more calmly and rationally about everything. A few weeks later, I made a firm decision. I would stop supporting Christophe financially. I felt a deep sense of guilt toward Colleen, my nephew, and my niece, but I knew I had no other choice. I spent several days with lingering doubts about whether my decision had been the right one. One day, an important meeting at my workplace added another layer of stress. The meeting's agenda was about financial issues with a partner company. Since external dealings were involved, the matter was complex and required a very delicate approach. Feeling a strong sense of responsibility for my role, I poured all my energy into preparing for it. During the meeting, when I heard Christophe's company's name come up, I felt a momentary pang of tension, but I maintained a calm exterior and stated my opinion. For companies that are dependent on the funding we provide, we need to conduct even more thorough risk evaluations. In particular, cases where financial transparency is lacking should be closely scrutinized. My statement had not explicitly named Christophe's company. However, there were undoubtedly those who understood the implications of my words. My company was Christophe's company's largest client, and the relationship between the two was critical to the operations of both businesses. If my company were to halt its funding, Christophe's company would face significant consequences, making it difficult to recover. Unless the issue was fully resolved, the future of Christophe's company would inevitably remain bleak. Even Christophe himself seemed aware of his company's precarious situation. Through office rumors and frequent meetings held by his superiors, he could sense that things were not going well. The company's operations were not running smoothly, and its financial problems were becoming increasingly severe by the day. Rumors began to circulate that their relationships with key clients, which had been a lifeline, were starting to crack. It became clear that these rumors were likely true, and Christophe couldn't ignore their growing reality. Troubled by issues at home, Christophe found himself further cornered by the worsening state of his company, with no idea how to turn things around. That day, upon returning from a sales trip, Christophe was greeted by his visibly flustered subordinates. Their faces betrayed a clear sense of unease and urgency about the grim situation they knew lay ahead. It was hardly surprising, as there was no trace of optimism within Christophe's company. Problems continued to surface like ripples spreading on water, one after another. "Mr. Christophe, we've got a serious problem. We've received a notice from one of our major clients stating that the renewal of our funding agreement is currently on hold. They haven't provided details, but it's been suggested that there may be concerns about our reliability." Christophe was stunned. Even losing a single client would have serious repercussions for their operations. Among them, my company was an especially critical partner. Find out the details immediately. Contact the person in charge and get a full grasp of the situation. Meanwhile, I understood the weight of the responsibility I bore for proposing a suspension of dealings. It was clear that Christophe's company was on the verge of collapse, but I carefully maintained a boundary between emotions and business. A few days later, I reached out to Christoph again. It wasn't just a personal issue between siblings. I felt a formal discussion from a business perspective was necessary. "Christoph, I want to meet and talk again. Let me know the time and place that works for you." Christoph sighed as he read my message, torn as he typed his reply. "Got it. How about the same cafe this weekend?" On the day of our meeting, we faced each other again in the cafe, the tension between us even heavier than before. The fatigue on Christoph's face was evident, and I could tell at a glance that he was cornered. "I came today to talk about work as well," I said bluntly, diving straight in. "I've heard that your company is struggling with cash flow." Christoph frowned, lowering his voice as he responded. "That's true. But what's the point of bringing it up now? You're not planning to help, are you?" "I'm not here to help," I replied firmly. "I wanted you to understand the standards our company uses to determine whether to continue a business relationship, and I think you need to take a much more serious look at why you're failing to meet those standards." At my words, Christoph fell silent. "You can't keep relying on money and connections to fix things anymore." "As your family, that's all I can say." I spoke plainly, then left the cafe. What direction Christoph's life would take from this moment was still uncertain. The outcomes awaiting him were unclear, and the consequences of his choices would now be determined by his own decisions and responsibilities. This moment became a pivotal reminder for me of the weight of personal accountability. While the fate of Christoph's company was significant, my thoughts were mostly consumed by the family he had shattered as a result of his affair. I couldn't stop thinking about the future of my nephew and niece, who had been affected by the fallout of the affair and impending divorce. I couldn't simply ignore Christoph's behavior, knowing there must be a way to prevent their future from being destabilized by an irresponsible person. I realized that if no action was taken, more victims would continue to emerge. A few days later, a change came into my own life. My efforts and achievements were recognized, and I was promoted to department manager. As a manager, I now carried greater responsibilities than ever before and found myself in situations where I had to make even more critical decisions in my daily work. However, I was determined to face these responsibilities head-on without running away. One day, while reviewing an important document at work, something caught my eye. The contents highlighted how crucial my decision-making would be for future operations. It was related to a contract with the small business where Christoph worked. The document detailed the mutually beneficial relationship we had built over the past several years. But upon closer examination, I began to question whether this business relationship was truly justifiable. The next morning, I convened an urgent meeting with the legal and accounting departments to request a thorough audit of our dealings with Christoph's company. We must make decisions purely based on business logic, without any influence from personal ties, I firmly stated. My colleagues agreed with my stance and immediately set the necessary actions in motion. The results of the investigation confirmed my suspicions. Christoph's company was struggling financially, and it was revealed that some payments were overdue. "This cannot be overlooked," the head of the legal department said emphatically. "Considering their circumstances, this situation could negatively impact our company if left unaddressed. We should proceed with renegotiating the contract immediately." I nodded firmly. "Let's proceed with steps toward suspending our transactions. However, please ensure the other party is given a reasonable grace period." As a result, Christoph's company lost its critical support from my company, their primary client. Christoph received this news the following day. Christoph panicked and immediately called me. "Irene, why would you do this? Suspending the contract like this? This is business. It wasn't a decision made based on personal feelings. If your company had been managed properly, this wouldn't have happened. I can't believe how cold you've become. We're family. Being family doesn't mean I'll overlook dishonesty or irresponsible behavior. I made the right decision as a department manager. A manager. I hadn't mentioned it, had I? I was promoted to department manager recently. I didn't know. I had no idea you were in such a position. Christophe fell silent, at a loss for words. My unwavering resolve and the harsh reality left him with no escape. Our company's decision to suspend the contract with Christophe's company was a painful but necessary choice to protect the interests of both sides. However, the decision caused greater repercussions than anticipated, quickly spreading to other business partners. In the industry, trust is paramount, and once lost, it is incredibly difficult to regain. Rumors spread rapidly, and Christophe's company found itself losing orders from clients one after another. As a result, cash flow worsened, and delays in paying employee salaries began to affect the entire operation. Moreover, securing new clients became nearly impossible, and the company's reputation hit rock bottom. The decision we made was the catalyst that pushed Christophe's company toward a financial crisis. Additionally, the public exposure of his affair led to unavoidable legal proceedings regarding the divorce. With custody and living arrangements for my nephew and niece becoming increasingly complicated, Christophe seemed to finally grasp the gravity of the consequences his reckless actions had caused. Meanwhile, I began exploring alternative ways to support my nephew and niece so they wouldn't have to bear further uncertainty. I decided to set up a trust account specifically for their educational expenses, taking direct control of its management. This ensured that the funds couldn't be misused by Christophe and that the money would be properly allocated for its intended purpose. Furthermore, I decided to enroll Christophe's children in an educational support program offered through my company. This would provide them with more opportunities and expand their future options as much as possible. In this way, I found a way to impose direct consequences on Christophe while still providing the minimum level of support as a family member. I am confident that this decision was the right one. However, Christophe's situation continued to deteriorate. Desperate to rebuild his company, Christophe worked tirelessly alongside his colleagues. Yet reality was unforgiving, and despite their efforts, his company was unable to recover from its financial struggles, eventually facing bankruptcy. After the company collapsed, Christophe encountered even greater challenges. No matter how hard he tried to repair his relationship with Colleen and regain his family's trust, her feelings remained unchanged. Eventually, their divorce was finalized. Christophe was heartbroken, overwhelmed with regret for losing the family that once meant so much to him. Then came another blow. He learned that full custody of his children had been awarded to Colleen. Losing his children filled Christophe with sorrow, regret, and a deep sense of loneliness. The peaceful days he had once shared with his family became distant memories, while the harshness of his current reality loomed mercilessly before him. News of Christophe's affair and divorce reached our parents as well, and they decided to disown him. They didn't ask why Christophe had chosen to engage in the affair. For them, losing custody of their grandchildren felt like losing the children themselves, leaving them deeply disappointed. The parents who had once supported him warmly now chose to step away from him entirely. Faced with this cold reality, Christophe was overwhelmed by feelings of powerlessness and regret. No matter how many apologies he offered, his family's trust could not be restored, and he found himself isolated in despair. As for me, I chose to move forward, refusing to be consumed by the family's problems. I took time to reflect on myself and decided to take a new step, leaving my family home to live on my own. Though leaving the familiar comfort of family life was bittersweet, I felt that establishing an independent life in a new environment was something I needed to do. When I first moved my belongings into my new apartment, I realized that this was my own space, a fresh start, and the first step toward carving out my own life. The new days ahead would come with challenges, but I believed they would also bring growth. On top of that, after several years, I found myself in a relationship again. My boyfriend is the calm and thoughtful type I've been longing for, someone who truly understands and supports me. The time we spend together is always fulfilling. At work, I continue to excel as a department manager, contributing to the company's success and generating results. Through my daily life, I've learned to value myself and rediscover the joys of life. In my heart, I feel a growing sense of hope, filled with new possibilities. Now, I look forward to the future I am building with my own hands.